Good evening and welcome to 365 Days of Stories with Theo Mayer. Tonight, day 50, and continuing with the story or the legend of Prince Ahmed al-Kamil. As you might remember, he had fled the Generalife and was on his way to try to find this beautiful princess who he had now a little painting of, a little portrait that had been delivered by his sweet friend the dove, who had expired or perished, and his flight back had been pierced by an arrow and had perished at Ahmed's feet, with the necklace or the little band of pearls and the portrait. So he had decided he had to leave and had to go off in search of this beautiful woman who he felt such a longing for in his heart. He felt such a love for her, recognizing something from within himself of her. Well, he had gained the trust of the owl. Owl was going to go with him, and he went out at night so no one would actually see him, and off into the woods he went. And once there, he stopped and held a council with the owl, because he didn't really know where he was going. He hadn't really decided yet. And so he spoke with Al about this. Where should he go? Where was it that he should, set his sights on? And the owl thought about it for a moment and then responded that he had an acquaintance, an old acquaintance in the city of Seville. And he'd met this bird, which was a raven, many years before, when he had been off on a trip to visit his uncle. And as he was flying around at night, which is what he always did, in search of the frugal amount of food that he ate, a few mice did it. He kept seeing a light in a tower, and he went to investigate. And there within the tower was a magician, a conjurer, and surrounding the conjurer were books of magic, books of spells. And sitting upon his shoulder, the magician's shoulder, was a raven, black raven that he had brought with him from Egypt. Now, the conjurer had been known to be very powerful, and the raven had taken in a great amount of information and knowledge of, well, we could call them almost dark arts. And even once the conjurer, the magician, had passed away, the raven continued to inhabit that tower. Well, it turns out that the prince liked this idea because he felt the raven might know something about the princess, might recognize her portrait, and in so doing, send him or guide him on his way, give him some direction as to where he needed to go. So off they went towards Seville. And the prince had brought with him a small collection of jewels that he had to buy whatever he needed along the ways. And he had sewn these into his garments so they wouldn't be readily accessible in case he was met by robbers somewhere along the way. Now, they traveled at night, and of course, this was to accommodate the owl, whose habit it was to travel by night. And as soon as the light of the sun was nearing the horizon, about to appear as sunrise, they would find some place to stop. And the owl, being so well acquainted with the topography, always enjoyed getting them to somewhere where there was some ancient ruins. And he liked staying in these places, and just something about them drew the owl to them. He knew where they were, and that's where he headed, get them to another place where there were some ancient ruins where they would spend the night. And so little by little, they made it to Seville. And the owl, once they got there, found a perch in a hollow tree, and the prince went in through the great gates of Seville, the town of Seville, and made his way quickly to the tower, which is still standing to this very day. It was, I can't remember the name of it, begins with a G, Giraldi, the Tower of Giraldi, I believe it is. And it's a very tall tower. And the prince got there and ascended the stairs to the very top. And when he got to the top, he found the raven there. And the raven, well, yes, the raven had two eyes, but one of them was kind of a little glossed over, like it was clear that he couldn't, or at least wouldn't be able to see out of it clearly. And so the raven had its head turned to the side, and with one eye was looking down at a diagram that was on the stone floor. It was studying it. And the prince, when he got there, with all due reverence for this, very old and wise bird, he greeted the raven, "Oh, wise conjurer," or something to that effect, and introduced himself as a person that was in search of the object of his love. Now, when the raven heard this, the raven cackled a little bit, laughing at the prince, because the raven, in the old age that he was, and being the old bird that he was, thought that love was highly overrated and something to be scoffed at more than dealt with. But he contained himself, and he said to the prince, I see that you are seeking my wisdom here in the realm of love. Come over it, and let me read your palm, and I'll tell you how you shall fare in this realm. And the prince was like, no, that's not what I need. What I need is to try to find the particular, a particular damsel. And the raven, on hearing this, immediately chimed in, well, here where you are in Seville, with all of the dark-eyed maidens that dance in the orange groves and are, out and about, certainly how could you be at a loss for love? They're all about us. All you need do is go out on one of those evenings when they're dancing. All will be well. The prince was a little bit amazed by this old bird, which one good eye. He was standing on one leg, on a perch. And here he was, being kind of brash a little bit about finding a maiden and what would happen afterwards. And the prince was like, no, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm seeking love. The love I have for one person in particular. And this is what she looks like. And he took out the little portrait and he held it in front of the raven. And the raven studied it and was like, oh, wow, she's very, very beautiful indeed. But I don't know who this is. And I'm not one that, visits the realms of young ladies. In fact, where do I go? I'm an old bird. I'm the one that, caws at the house of the man who's about to die and hangs out with old people, old folks, not youngsters, and especially not young women. Well, said the prince, is there any direction that you can give me? Is there any help that you can give me on where I might be able to find her? Anyone that might know? And the raven said, yes, indeed. There is a place I believe you should go. And in going to this place, I think you might find some help there. And the raven described a great traveler who had been everywhere, and that this great traveler would be the person that he should go and see. And this traveler lived in Cordova, and he would find him at the base of a very, very tall palm tree that was in the courtyard of the mosque that was in the city. And surely, if anybody would know, this great traveler would know. Well, the prince thanked him very, very much for the information, took his leave, went out, found the owl, who was still sleeping, and off they began on their way toward Cordova. And it wasn't many days' travel before they got there. And in through the gates, the prince went, leaving the owl again in a roost in the hollow of a tree to await the prince's return. So off he went, and it wasn't hard to find this palm tree. It was taller than any other tree around. It rose out from between the citrus groves that were there. It just kind of seemed to pop out of it. And there it was indeed in front of the mosque. And there was a crowd of people there. All kinds of people, it seemed. And as he got closer, he could not believe his eyes, for what he saw was a green parrot at the base of this palm tree. And everybody listening to this parrot, who was able to speak in the language of humans, and was talking and reciting poetry and going on and on. And the prince turned to somebody. Who is that parrot? Is he indeed the great traveler that I have heard so much about? Or is he nothing but a bird? And this person that he'd turned to was like, oh my gosh, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, this is, and he goes on and on for a little while about how amazing this parrot is. So the prince decides, well, I'm going to have a private session with him to talk to him about what I'm looking for. And he got that private session. And when I come back again tomorrow, I will tell you how that went, and if the prince was able to find out where to go next to find the princess. Have a good rest of your day. Hope to see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining.